All right, everyone. Welcome to our first lesson that we will be conducting through Learning at Home. Today we're going to do a linear relations review. So we're going to talk about things that we did before the March break. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. And then we'll start learning new content as we move throughout the week. Okay? So, today's lesson will be on 3 topics. First, I'm going to introduce the home glossary. So this is something that I expect everybody to be doing at home to learn new words that we're going to introduce in this course. Next, we're going to talk about how to use these video lessons. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some tips to make sure you're getting the most out of this and using your time effectively. And last of all, we will do our review for linear relations. This slide shows us the home glossary. This is a document that I have posted onto the hub and that you should all either print off or make a copy of on your iPad or on a piece of paper. When we introduce new words, you should be copying down that keyword and its definition. That way you have a quick reference page to see all of these words at once. So for us, we would put down the title of our unit, which is linear relations. We would put the keyword here and its definition here. Okay? So, I'm going to be highlighting keywords throughout the lessons and talk about what you should do with that. Moving on to our next topic. So how to use these videos. When we're doing these lessons, you have control over the speed. So whenever you see a keyword, you should pause the video. And the reason you should pause the video is so that you can put that keyword on your home glossary. Whenever you see examples, you should be writing them in your own notes. And anytime that you have a question, you should write it down. Okay? The reason I want you to write down your questions is that after you've completed the lesson, you can take all of the questions you have and send them to me in an email. If you email me your questions, I will type you back an answer. Okay? So that's how we're going to have to communicate as we're working through learning at home. And now we're going to get started with our linear relations review. Oftentimes I will present a key word on the board like we see here with linear relation. This is something that you should pause and put into your home glossary. Okay? So, once you've copied down linear relation, see that the definition for a linear relation is a relation between two variables that appears as a straight line when graphed. Now that's a lot there. We need to identify some key things from that definition. It says that it is a relation between two variables. And we can also see that it gives us a straight line when you graph it. So we've been working with these linear relations for a while now. We know that when we make a graph, we can identify a linear relation by if it forms a straight line. We introduced the idea of a variable in our definition for a linear relation. Well, that word variable is another key word, so we need to put that into our home glossary. And we can see that a variable is going to be a topic that we are measuring and that we're using it for comparison. So I would pause this video and make sure you get that definition put into your home glossary. In this class, we're going to talk about two different variables in linear relations. We have to talk about our independent variable and our dependent variable. So I would pause this video again, put both the independent variable and the dependent variable into your home glossary. Once you've done that, resume the video and we'll talk about these two variables. In the case of the independent variable, we're talking about the measurement that influences the other measure in the relation, and that it goes on the x-axis. The dependent variable is what gets influenced in a linear relation, and it goes on the y-axis. So when we're talking about linear relations, we need to consider our independent and dependent variables. And we're going to do that by recognizing that we would put the independent variable along the x-axis, and that we would put our dependent variable along the y-axis. So our x-axis goes left and right, our y-axis goes up and down. So we would put our independent variable along the x-axis. And we would put our dependent variable along the y-axis. We will often start out our linear relations with a table of values. And we put our information in a table of values so that we can see our independent variable and our dependent variable. This will allow us to compare the independent and dependent variable and then make a graph. An example of this could be seen if we were to make a relation between the number of hours you work in a part-time job and the amount of money that you get paid. For example, if you were to work 0 hours, you would make $0. But as time goes up, so you work 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, and so on, you would start to get paid. So let's say you make $15 per hour. Well, that would mean after 1 hour you would make $15. After 2 hours you would make $30. After 3 hours you would make $45. And after 4 hours you would make $60. We could then make a graph that would compare our independent and dependent variables. In our example, the independent variable is the number of hours worked, and then the dependent variable is the amount of money that you get paid. We know from our table of values that at 0 hours worked, you would make $0. After working for 1 hour, you would have $15. 2 hours would give you $30, 3 hours would give you $45, and 4 hours would give you $60. This is now a complete scatter plot based on our table of values, but we aren't studying scatter plots in isolation. We are studying linear relations. So we still need to complete our line of best fit that will go through all of our points. Now we have a graph of our linear relation. Now that we have our graph, we can use it to get some information. If your boss were to ask you to work, say, 2.5 hours, we could draw a line up to 2.5 hours and then go from there over to where it would hit the amount of money that you would get paid. We could do this for inside of the data, so from 1 to 4 hours, but we could also use it to extend our idea. So we could make our x-axis a little bit longer, and then we could find out if maybe you were to work 5 or 6 hours. The only thing is that in order to do this, we would have to extend our line a lot farther than the data shows. When we do this inside the data, it is called interpolation. Whereas if we do this outside the data, it is called extrapolation. Interpolation and extrapolation are ideas that we looked at in class, but I think it's important that we review them. So, interpolation is using the line of best fit to predict a value within the data set. The key part there is that it is within the data set. Extrapolation is a similar idea, but we use the line of best fit to predict the value outside of the data set. So that's the end of our review for today. I'm not going to assign any new work, but I do expect that people are working through the work packages that were given out before March break. You see here 2 of those packages. Those would be good topics to work through for today. Make sure that all of the work is complete before we move on to new topics. I wanted to talk specifically about one point before ending. For the creating scatter plots and lines of best fit activity, I noticed that some people were having trouble creating a scale. If you look at your points here, we have our independent variable for age, and we have our dependent variable for earnings. We can't just take these numbers and write them down. And what I mean by that is I saw people going 25 and then 30 and then 35 and so on. That's not how these graphs work, okay? It looks like it's okay at first, but once we start to get into numbers further down, like 41, 62, those values throw off our scale. So we have to count by the same amount every single time. What I would suggest is that you count the number of spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 spaces. We then look at our highest value, which is 75, and we take away our lowest value, which is 25. That gives us 50 values that we need to count within 16 spaces. So we need to decide how should we count? We'll get into the method in a bit more detail later on, but for now, I'm going to suggest you count by 5. So, in this case, let's clear that there, and let's start just before our lowest value. So let's start at 20, and then we'll count by 5. So 20, 25, 30, 35, and so on, all the way up the graph. You'll do the same idea for the lowest earnings of 22,000 all the way to the highest earnings, which is 43,000. And that will be done to put our earnings on the y-axis. All right, everyone. So today we introduced the home glossary. We talked about how to get the most out of these video lessons, and we did a review on linear relations. Our next lesson will be put up on Wednesday, and until then, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. Remember that my email address is mayotte@hwdsb.on.ca. All right, have a good day, everyone.